Should we buy or sell Herbalife? First off, read this disclaimer carefully. And do your good deed of today by liking and subscribing. So we have a theme under the megatrends called biohacking. It is massively outperforming the S&P 500 from the low, but we are massively down from the highs, which kind of make this percentage even better. So we've definitively seen very big moves in this space. Biohacking is very interesting. So you have Herbalife here. I call it just nutritional supplements. 16% from the low, minus 58% away from the highs. So definitively, in a bear market territory. So here is, their website, Nutrition for Your Best Life. It's a decent website. I expected it actually to be a bit more fancy than this, but here you can see their products. Yeah, so weight management, skin and healthcare. And so they do have a broader portfolio. As here you can see, some juicing. So basically all kinds of, ways to improve your health. So yeah, let's just jump into the charts. So weekly data points, a super big picture. So the thing here is that Herbalife is a stock that sort of does its own thing. So even though officially we have had a bull market between 2009 and you could at least argue up until 2021, but Herbalife, it has had many bear markets. All of a sudden in 2012, Herbalife was like, I'm going to have a bear market, if you don't mind, minus 67%. And then all of a sudden here in 2019, Herbalife had a big rally and then just decided, well, I'm actually going to have a vicious bear market. Down minus 67% here, or minus 46%. But Herbalife has also had spectacular rallies. From this low here to this high, all of a sudden 336%. The point here is that Herbalife is just a different animal. It will have bull markets and bear markets when it feels like, and that this stock sort of behaves like this makes it especially interesting. In this current market where everything seems to be just perfectly correlated. Because Herbalife is starting to be a bit weird now again. So even though the S&P 500, as an example, it's been going down, ever since mid-May, Herbalife has gone up, down, and now breaking out a bit. Very interesting. So Herbalife is outperforming. Interesting. You could make a super strong case that we have fallen down to a support level. So we have a cluster of support back here, here, and here. So there is a horizontal level in play. And we have corroborating data here from bulls literally buying. Looking at the daily data points, we have something that looks, a rounding bottom-ish. That is especially a rare sight in the current market. So this is Herbalife. Let's look at Nasdaq, QQQ. Very different indeed. Or let's look at ARKK. Yeah, ARKK actually is showing some bottoming behavior. And this is the type of stuff you will see after a protracted downtrend, is that all of a sudden you have some securities that mysteriously form lows before the major indexes. So it's interesting. It's not a definite it's guaranteed that Herbalife will go up. It's just that we are literally seeing some outperformance. It's right here and it's facts. Looking at RSI, we are emerging from a very low level, a level that is rare and is dangerous for the bears, similar with the PPOs. MACD is at an extreme low level, and it is flirting with a potential buy signal. On the daily data points, So RSI is definitely seen a lot of improvement and corroborates what we see in price. When we zoom in a bit here on accumulation distribution, it also is corroborating here. So this is overall rather interesting. So I write horizontal support and rounding bottom as the lines in the sand, and I give the technicals a 5. What is especially interesting here is that Herbalife is outperforming major key indexes. That's a very interesting tell. The issue with the rounding bottom is that it's a bit of a fuzzy line in the sand. It's not like clean, like a moving average. Let's look at seasonality. So it gets even more interesting because in green here over the last 5 years, just look at it. The beginning of next week is very favorable to the bulls. In blue, the last 7 years, very favorable leading up until late-ish July. In red, over the last 10 years, a similar thing. The bullish seasonality peaks later into July. To the left, over the last 5 years, June, the current month, is the strongest. July is more messy. We usually, on average, see a gain, but we only close higher 25% of the time. Looking at the last 10 years, June is the strongest month, but July is it's messy. The last 19 years. So June, the strongest month for Herbalife. And we are still in June, and when we look here to the right, there's more left in the bullish seasonality. So that's interesting. July is a bit of a messy thing, but we do see why here, because the early part of July usually sees some pullback, but then it gets very strong into the later part of July. So I give 3 bulls on seasonality. Let's look at the fundamentals. So Sachs has a number 5 strong sell. Okay, that's not bullish, but we do have some very interesting style scores. So E value, B growth, D momentum. So the Sachs rank viewed in this context, it could mean that the low for the Sachs rank is in, because there's value and there's growth. Industry rank bottom 9%. Retail, pharmacies, and drugstores. Okay, so that's I'm a bit surprised by the category. Looking at the market cap, 2.5 billion US dollars. No yield, not a huge shocker there. But what are the insiders doing? They are buying, buy. So throughout May, they were buying hand over fist. That is interesting. Very interesting indeed. You do want the insiders to buy. Looking at the consensus estimates, so only 5 analysts are covering the stock. The average price target is 59% above us. Highest is 93% above us. The lowest is 12% above us. So I will give a 6 here on the fundamentals. This looks pretty interesting. Pretty interesting indeed. Long term, we do have only 14% correlation with the S&P 500, but that is what we expected because Herbalife is just a mess. It goes up and down and up and down. It has its own distinct and very separate psychology. 52% positive with BFIT, and BFIT is the health and wellness ETF. 27% here with the consumer discretionary ETF, XLI. Then 30% with XRT, which is retail. Daily data points, 80% with S&P 500, 86% with BFIT, 82% with XLI, 77% with the XRT. So what happens with BFIT is going to have the biggest impact on Herbalife. So let's look at BFIT. Global X Health and Wellness ETF. So the interesting thing I see here from a more bullish, perspective is that we have fallen down to this potential support level back here. And this is also a bit double bottom-ish. The problem is that the latest candlestick is below the previous ones. And looking at the low end here of the wick, it also is lower than the previous, the most recent lows. So it's a bit, it's bearish, but simultaneously we are rather oversold. Extreme MACD, also PPOs. So it's not really safe to short either. That's the issue. Daily data points here, we do get a rather similar message. So here is Herbalife relative to BFIT. Something a bit messy with the charts looking further back. But anyway, we do see that Herbalife has underperformed BFIT. Then again, it does have a tendency to outperform every now and then, which we can now see in price and also here in RSI. So let's go here to the daily data points to get some additional intel. So looking at the RSI, previous times where we have had outperformance from Herbalife, it has peaked a bit higher, but there is a bit of a risk that maybe a sizable chunk of the outperformance already has occurred. So what does the seasonality say? So the seasonality over the last 10 years favors the ETF. Over the last 7 years, around later June is usually when the ETF outperforms. Here is BFIT relative to the S&P 500. So we have had a protracted period of underperformance, but recently BFIT has outperformed the S&P 500. So let's look at the daily data points here. So we do see this pattern that is very rounding bottom-ish. And so that is, it is a bullish technical pattern. We are approaching, RSI-wise, a territory that has formed some temporary highs, not, relatively recently. So what does the seasonality say? So in green over the last 5 years, usually this is a bit of a peak. Last 7 years, similar as well. So I give a -2 here on relative performance. We do end up with a score of 3. So the data is more favorable of bullish trade ideas. And that, doesn't simply mean, buy the stock. You could get into like the option market and get fancy there. There's many ways to do it. Anyway, the line in the sand is that we are emerging from very key horizontal support, and we also have a rounding bottom on the Herbalife chart. And we also saw it in terms of relative performance. So this is just an interesting situation. What is especially cool with Herbalife is that the correlation with the S&P 500 is very modest. So it's not one of those stocks where what happens to it is completely contingent on the rest of the market. And in this market condition with all the chaos, that is actually very beneficial. It's really a time, to have, stocks in your portfolio that have, mild correlations with the other stuff. It's important to be aware of the fact that mutual funds and various other, players in the market are forced to buy. They are not allowed to go short. That means that when they have money that they must put to work, guess what? They are far more likely during a downtrend, especially in the major indexes, to put that money to work in stocks that are very mildly correlated with the major indexes. So those kinds of situations can be rather beneficial to stocks like Herbalife. So yeah, whatever you do, of course, in this market, you definitively want to have very clear rules about when you get into, and also especially when you get out of positions. So very chaotic conditions, for sure. The sell-off in the major indexes has been a lot more aggressive than many expected. It's very important to just know how percentages work, because those who bought between this period here, later, yeah, 22nd of December, leading all the way up here into early January of this year, they have lost approaching 31%, even though the fall from this high to this low is minus 23.5%.